All right, let's bring in tonight's panel, Daily Telegraph journalist James Willis and former Liberal Senator Holly Hughes. And I want to start with your reaction to that topic. Now, Zelensky says he's ready for a meeting with Trump. Holly, this is going to be difficult. I think that Putin will still want areas of Donetsk, he'll still want land. So this is where the most challenging part will be, you know, what Ukraine is prepared to give up, if anything.
Absolutely, and this is obviously where the rubber's going to hit the road when these negotiations occur between Putin and Zelensky. But isn't it incredible that on Saturday, every media outlet, every journalist that could possibly yell down the camera that Trump had failed, that it was a terrible meeting with Putin, it had only gone for a much shorter time frame that was originally anticipated, and yet what's occurred today is probably the most significant step towards peace we've seen in the past 4 years. And, you know, it'll be interesting to see if those same journalists and media outlets, if there is a meeting between Putin and Zelensky, which would be a huge step in itself, whether they will then be able to bring themselves to acknowledge the role that President Trump's played. And just in that grab you just played where they said it was Team Europe and Team United States, you just know Team Aussie ain't getting a look in any time soon at that White House.
Absolutely not. But Holly's right, James. This is a very big win for Trump. And, you know, and as she says, a lot of the media were saying that he shouldn't have even met with Putin on Saturday in Alaska.
Well, I think if you put aside
Saturday our time, I should say.
the bias that a lot of media outlets and the hatred that they have for Donald Trump, and that has been since he was in office for the first time, plus the fact that compared to the Joe Biden administration, things are moving at light speed. Look, I'm just of the view here that if we're getting deals done and it is achieving peace in conflicts, not just with Ukraine and Russia, but also in the Middle East, and Donald Trump is front and centre of that and doing what Joe Biden and the previous administration was not able even to get close. In fact, these things did unfold under Joe Biden and the Democrats. Well, then it can only be a good thing. So once you get past this sort of outrage and this concern about the way that Trump does business, if we're getting the end result, then what are we complaining about it? If he's doing it in a matter of time, and if there is a meeting with Zelensky and Putin and Trump moving forward, and it does achieve peace instead of just a ceasefire, then what a fantastic result.
Absolutely. Look, let's return to the breaking news tonight that Netanyahu has called Albanese a weak man. Holly, he put it so simply, but got it oh so right.
Oh, there is nothing incorrect with what Benjamin Netanyahu tweeted out tonight. And if every single question in question time next week in both the House of Reps and the Senate doesn't start with weak politician Albanese as some form of intro into the question, well, that will just be another mark against the coalition and their inability to stand up to this government, because Netanyahu is 100% spot on when he says that. He is a weak politician. I am horrifically embarrassed at the moment to be an Australian when you see that visa cancellation, when you see what is being done to our relationship with the only democracy in the Middle East. And you know, this whole talk about the two-state solution, Hamas doesn't want a two-state solution, and Hamas don't actually care what happens in Gaza. Hamas don't care about Gazans. They just want Israel gone. That is their end point, and that is exactly what they're maintaining themselves for. And the fact that our Home Affairs Minister is now worried about upsetting Hamas sympathisers while he opens the floodgates to Gazans without effective and proper checks, refusing to keep Australians safe because we don't know who they are that are coming in. And I bet you bottom dollar they would cause a whole lot more division in this country than the Israeli politicians when they come through.
Yeah, I also think on that, I think it's shameful that even if they had even remotely considered that bringing someone like this here could lead to protests or violent behaviour, and that was a cause for concern, is disgraceful. And the fact that we've actually got to that point. If there were Jews being radical, if there were Jews that were protesting and firebombing mosques, then you'd be saying, well, this is fair enough. But I mean, the grounds that you've just articulated there, Sharri, are not grounds, in my view, to cancel a visa. I think it's a very dangerous precedent. And I think the Prime Minister deserved what he copped from Netanyahu in the last few hours, because he's basically shot the breeze on this. And he's just favoured the Labor Party, the internal caucus, the grassroots members, realising there's a lot of votes involved in that side of the conflict. And as a result, it was only going to be a matter of time before he poked the bear, and that's what we've seen.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this will undoubtedly have an impact on the Australia-United States relationship as well, because there's no question President Trump will see what
Albanese is not avoiding this topic of conversation.
Well, Trump hasn't met with Albanese already. 9 months since he was elected. Now you've got one of America's closest allies, Trump and Netanyahu, who've been working together so closely. Netanyahu's come out and said this publicly. I mean,
isn't it interesting though? Trump meets with Putin Saturday, our time. There's the Europeans and Zelensky by Tuesday, our time.
Yep.
Now, goodness knows how quick they can manage getting Zelensky and Putin in a room together, but Trump's then saying there'll be a trilap where he'll be a part of that. Yet if you listen to the Albanese apologists here, it's way too difficult to organise a visit. It's so impossible. We have all these complex diary requirements.
Well, they just can't. If they had a meeting, they'd be there in a second.
Tiny West African nations, 2 million people, have met and sat down with Donald Trump in the White House. Zelensky has had 2 meetings. Now, granted, there is a war going on. Netanyahu, multiple meetings. The head of Ireland, the head of the EU, the head of France. Keir Starmer's met with him twice in the UK, more than 20 countries, and we cannot get a meeting.
I don't think they want one.
Because the Prime Minister probably hasn't picked up the phone and said, do you mind if I come this Sunday and we can have it?
Well, they've been trying. They can't even get a phone call. They've been trying.
I reckon they're just trying to ride out the Trump presidency and don't want to meet with him at all because he's going to get an absolute spanking and completely well-deserved.
Now, just quickly before we go to the Labor's productivity roundtable, now the Prime Minister opened it by saying that he was open for ideas, but already unions and businesses have clashed over the proposal for a tax on employers to pay for training workers. James, what can you tell us about some of the other ideas we heard on day one of this roundtable, which is going to drag on?
Well, Sharri, as we knew that by giving the unions a seat and a front row seat at this productivity summit all this week, then there was going to be a lot of bizarre union ideas. We've already heard about the 4-day work week. Today it was about a mandatory tax on companies that earn more than $500,000 to pay for training. Look, the other idea that I think is worth mentioning on day one, because I just think it is what is wrong with this country. Allegra Spender spoke about the fact that when migrants come here, they have to be re-skilled or they can't do the skills and the training or the job that they did overseas. And that process needs to be streamlined. Now, my counter-argument to that, and I'm sure a lot of people watching would agree, is we've got 1 million people, 1 million people that are on job seeker and youth allowance in this country that are not working and they should be. We have a skills shortage here. Is the solution really to make it easier for migrants to get into jobs here, or should we be prioritising at every opportunity upskilling Australians at home?
James, you can't expect people to work for social security payments. Don't have a work for the Dole initiative. Don't upskill these long-term unemployed. Why would you want to do that?
I know.
I mean, that is the attitude, that you actually cannot do anything to upskill long-term unemployed people. It's appalling.
And the elephant in the room here is migration. And it's not even on the agenda. No one's really talking about it properly. And as we know, a lot of economists are starting to say that we've got this zombie economy. It's propped up the economy. It's made the numbers look better than they are.
Kept us out of a recession, that's for sure. Well, I've got an economist coming up now, so I'm going to ask him precisely about this.
No worries.
James Willis, Holly Hughes, great to see you both.
Thank you.